tattoo. It's a mark of identity, a story etched into the skin, a permanent reminder of a moment, a feeling, a person. For most, it's a choice of empowerment, a way to claim ownership of their own body. But what happens when that choice is stolen? What happens when the artist you trust, the one meant to bring your vision to life, has a darker design in mind? What if the story he writes on your skin is not your own, but a twisted narrative of his control, a permanent scar on your soul? The story you are about to hear is a chilling journey into the darkness that can hide behind a charming smile and a buzzing needle. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the courage it takes to speak out. Before we delve into the shadows, if you appreciate stories of survival and justice, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell. Your support allows us to continue bringing these important narratives to light. Now, prepare yourself for the story of the twisted tattooist. The bell above the door to ink and dreams didn't so much chime as it sighed. A soft, melodic exhalation that seemed to welcome visitors into a world apart from the bustling, indifferent city street outside. For Amelia, the sound was the threshold to a new version of herself. At 21, she stood at the precipice of her own life, a recent university graduate with a sensible degree in marketing and a job in a sterile downtown office that felt more like a cage than a career. This tattoo, her first, was to be an act of quiet rebellion, a secret bloom of color and artistry just for her. The studio was nothing like the gritty, intimidating parlors she had nervously peeked into online. It was more like an art gallery or a chic, bohemian lounge. Exposed brick walls were adorned with framed, breathtakingly detailed illustrations, dragons whose scales shimmered with impossible life, celestial mandalas that seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, photorealistic portraits that captured the very soul of their subjects. The air smelled not of antiseptic and stale cigarette smoke, but of sandalwood incense, cleansing herbs, and the faint, sweet aroma of green tea. Soft, ambient music, the kind you'd hear in a high-end spa, drifted from unseen speakers. In the center of the room, a lush, velvet couch in emerald green invited clients to wait in comfort. Everything about the place was designed to soothe, to disarm, to enchant. And then there was him, Julian Thorne. He was the artist, the proprietor, the whispered name on the lips of everyone who knew anything about ink in the city. His online portfolio was a masterpiece, his reviews glowing testimonials to his genius and his gentle touch. He emerged from a back room, wiping his hands on a clean, black apron, and the spell of the room seemed to coalesce around him. He wasn't ruggedly handsome in the stereotypical tattoo artist way. He was ethereally beautiful. His hair was a cascade of dark curls, his eyes a startlingly pale shade of blue, and his smile was a slow, deliberate thing that made you feel as though you were the only person in the world. "Amelia?" he asked, his voice a low, smooth baritone that matched the music. "Welcome to Ink and Dreams. I've been looking forward to our session." He spoke as if they were meeting for a curated gallery viewing, not for a procedure involving needles and pain. He led her to the velvet couch, sat across from her in a worn leather armchair, and offered her a cup of herbal tea. He didn't rush. He didn't pull out stencils or a buzzing tattoo gun. He simply talked. He asked about the design she'd emailed him, a delicate spray of wildflowers, lavender and baby's breath, to wrap around her forearm. He asked what it meant to her, probing gently into her desire for a symbol of freedom, of natural, untamed beauty in a life that felt increasingly structured and gray. "It's a beautiful concept," he said, his pale eyes fixed on hers. "To carry a piece of the wild with you, a reminder that even in a concrete world, there is growth, there is life." He made her feel seen, understood. He wasn't just a technician executing a design. He was a collaborator, a co-conspirator in her act of self-definition. He spent nearly an hour in this consultation, sketching and refining her idea on a digital tablet, his long, elegant fingers moving with practiced grace. He'd tilt his head, narrow his eyes, and a small, thoughtful frown would touch his lips before he'd erase a line and redraw it with a subtle curve that made all the difference. He was a perfectionist, an artist in the truest sense. Amelia's initial nervousness melted away, replaced by a profound sense of trust. She was in the hands of a master. When he was finally satisfied with the design, he led her to the tattooing station. It was immaculately clean, every surface gleaming under soft, focused lighting. The tools were laid out with surgical precision. As she settled into the adjustable chair, her heart began to flutter again, a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Don't be nervous," Julian said softly, his voice close to her ear as he adjusted the armrest. She could feel the warmth of his breath, smell the faint, clean scent of his soap. "This is a transformative process. A little pain is just part of the journey. Think of it as the skin awakening to its new story." He prepped her arm with a practiced, gentle efficiency. The cool sting of the alcohol wipe, the crinkle of the plastic wrap, the precise application of the stencilate was all part of a ritual she had only imagined. Then came the sound. The low, electric hum of the tattoo gun. It was a sound that vibrated not just in the air, but deep in her bones, a primal buzz of anticipation. "Ready?" he murmured. She nodded, her throat suddenly dry. The first touch of the needle was a sharp, biting sting. A gasp escaped her lips, and she clenched her free hand into a fist. "Breathe," Julian's voice instructed, a calming anchor in the sea of sensation. "Just breathe with the needle, in and out. That's it. You're doing beautifully." He worked with an incredible focus, his brow furrowed in concentration. His touch was firm but not rough. Occasionally, he would pause to wipe away the excess ink and blood, his movements economical and precise. He kept up a soft, running monologue, a stream of soothing words that filled the space between the hum of the machine and Amelia's own ragged breaths. He spoke of art, of symbolism, of the ancient traditions of body marking. He told her she was strong, that she was taking the pain with a grace he rarely saw. The praise, the intimacy of his voice, the shared experience of pain and creation, it was intoxicating. It forged a bond, a strange and powerful connection between artist and canvas. The hours blurred. The initial sharp pain subsided into a dull, rhythmic throb, a strange kind of normal. Amelia found herself drifting, lulled by his voice and the steady vibration of the needle. She felt vulnerable, her arm exposed, her body in his hands, but his professional yet intimate demeanor kept any real fear at bay. He was in control, and it felt safe to surrender to it. When he finally stopped, the sudden silence was almost as jarring as the initial buzz. "We're done," he said, his voice soft. "Take a look." He gently wiped her arm one last time and held a mirror up. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. It was exquisite. The wildflowers were more vibrant, more alive than she had ever imagined. The lines were impossibly fine, the shading so subtle that the lavender sprigs seemed to have a real texture, a genuine fragrance. It was a masterpiece, etched forever onto her skin. Tears welled in her eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Julian smiled that slow, knowing smile. "It's you," he corrected gently. "I just helped bring it to the surface." He bandaged the tattoo with meticulous care, explaining the aftercare instructions in his calming baritone. He gave her a small tin of a special healing balm he made himself, infused with calendula and chamomile. As she paid, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline and exhaustion, he placed his hand over hers for a moment. His skin was cool. "This was a special session, Amelia," he said, his pale eyes holding hers. "I feel we created something truly beautiful together. Come back in a few weeks for a touch-up. It's on the house. I want to make sure it heals as perfectly as it was created." Amelia left ink and dreams in a daze, floating on a cloud of euphoria and endorphins. Her arm throbbed with a dull, satisfying ache, a physical reminder of the profound experience she had just been through. She felt changed, bolder, as if the art on her skin had seeped inward, coloring her very soul. That feeling of empowerment lasted for nearly a week. Amelia followed Julian's aftercare instructions to the letter, cleaning the tattoo gently, applying the fragrant balm, and admiring the healing artwork in the mirror. The initial redness and swelling faded, leaving behind the crisp, beautiful lines of her wildflowers. She felt a thrill every time she caught a glimpse of them peeking out from under her sleeve. It was her secret, her strength. But then, things began to shift. It started with the dreams. They were vivid and unsettling. In them, she was back in the studio, but it was different. The soft lighting was gone, replaced by a harsh, sterile glare. The sandalwood incense was replaced by a cloying, sickly sweet smell she couldn't identify. Julian was there, his face obscured by shadow, but she could feel the cold intensity of his gaze. He wasn't tattooing her arm. He was carving into it, the buzz of the machine a discordant, angry shriek. She would wake up with a gasp, her heart hammering against her ribs, her arm tingling with a phantom pain far worse than the real thing had been. She dismissed it as anxiety, her mind processing the intensity of the experience. But the dreams persisted, night after night, each one leaving her more drained, more unnerved than the last. During the day, a strange sense of unease began to follow her like a shadow. She started to feel watched. On her commute, she'd catch a glimpse of a figure in the crowd that seemed familiar, but they would vanish before she could get a clear look. At her desk, the reflection in her dark computer screen would sometimes seem to hold another presence just over her shoulder. She knew it was irrational, a product of her exhausted, dream-addled mind, but the feeling was unshakable. The tattoo itself began to feel different. It was still beautiful, objectively a work of art. But when she looked at it now, the initial joy was tainted by a creeping dread. It no longer felt like her own, felt like his, a mark of his ownership. The curve of a lavender stem would remind her of the way his fingers had felt on her skin. The delicate shading of a petal would bring back the low murmur of his voice in her ear. The tattoo was a brand, a permanent reminder of the hypnotic intimacy of that room. An intimacy that felt comforting at the time but now felt invasive, a violation she couldn't name. She found herself obsessively scrubbing her arm in the shower, as if she could wash away the feeling his touch had left behind. She started wearing long sleeves even on warm days, unable to bear the sight of it, unable to bear the thought of anyone else seeing it. Her secret rebellion had become a source of secret shame. About 2 weeks after her session, a colleague, a bright, bubbly woman named Chloe from the design department, stopped by her desk. "Oh my God, Amelia, is that a Julian Thorne?" she asked, her eyes wide with admiration, having caught a glimpse of the bandage Amelia was changing in the break room. Amelia's blood ran cold. You know his work." "Know his work? Are you kidding? He's a legend. I have one too. See?" Chloe pushed up the sleeve of her blouse to reveal a stunningly realistic hummingbird hovering over a fuchsia blossom on her inner bicep. The color was electric, the detail breathtaking. "I got it last year. The experience was intense, right? Almost spiritual." Amelia stared at the hummingbird, a knot tightening in her stomach. "Yeah," she managed to say. "Intense. He gets it, you know?" Chloe continued, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "It's like he can see right into your head. He knew exactly what I wanted, even better than I did. I've been meaning to go back for another. Did he give you his special healing balm? That stuff is magic." Amelia just nodded, unable to speak. The casual, effusive praise felt like a personal rebuke. Was she crazy? Was she the only one who felt this lingering darkness? That night, unable to sleep, she found herself scrolling through online tattoo forums. She searched for Julian Thorne and Ink and Dreams. The results were an endless stream of 5-star reviews, of breathless praise for his artistry and his professionalism. A true visionary. Made me feel so comfortable. The most incredible tattoo experience of my life. She was about to close the browser, feeling more isolated than ever, when she saw it. Buried deep within a long thread, a single, anomalous comment from a user named Lilipad_7. User: "Does anyone else feel weird after getting a tattoo from Julian Thorne? I can't explain it. The work is beautiful, but I don't know, like it's not mine. And I've been having the worst nightmares. Probably just me being strange." The post was from 3 months ago. There was only one reply. User, you're probably just having tattoo regret. His work is flawless. You should feel lucky. Amelia's heart seized. Probably just me being strange. That was it. That was the feeling. It wasn't just her. She clicked on the user's profile, a desperate need to connect with this Lilipad_7 surging through her. The profile was private. There was no way to contact her. Frustrated, she went back to her own arm, staring at the wildflowers under the harsh light of her bathroom lamp. She ran her fingers over the healed lines, tracing the design. And then she saw it. It was almost imperceptible, a detail so small, so cleverly integrated into the design that she had never noticed it before. Hidden in the intricate shading of a lavender leaf, nestled amongst the delicate lines, was a tiny, stylized shape. It wasn't a flower. It wasn't a leaf. It was a pair of letters, an elegant, looping J and T. Julian Thorne. He had signed his name on her. Not on the art, but on her. On her skin, hidden in plain sight. It was a secret mark, a hidden claim. The room began to spin. Her breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. The feeling of being watched, the nightmares, the sense of violation, it all coalesced into a single, horrifying point of clarity. This wasn't her imagination. This wasn't tattoo regret. This was intentional. This was something deeply, profoundly wrong. The masterpiece on her arm was no longer a symbol of her freedom. It was the signature of her captor. The buzzing of the tattoo gun echoed in her ears, no longer a sound of creation, but the sound of a cage being built, line by tiny line, right into her own skin. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was not the only one he had caged. The hunt for Lilipad_7, and for others like her, had just begun. The discovery of the hidden initials was a key turning a lock. The vague, formless anxiety that had plagued Amelia for weeks now had a name: violation. It had a face: Julian Thorne's. The world, which had felt unsettling and porous, suddenly sharpened into a terrifying clarity. The paranoia wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. The nightmares weren't just dreams. They were her subconscious screaming a truth she hadn't been ready to hear. Her first instinct was a frantic, primal urge to remove it. She stood in her bathroom, staring at her forearm, her mind racing through desperate, brutal scenarios. A Brillo pad, a kitchen knife, anything to scrape this foreign mark, this claim, off her body. The thought was so powerful, so visceral, that she had to physically grip the edge of the sink, knuckles white, to stop herself. The horror of what she was contemplating was eclipsed only by the horror of what had been done to her. Mutilating herself would only be completing his work. It would be another scar, another story of pain written on her skin. No, she needed a different kind of weapon. Her new obsession became Lilipad_7. The anonymous forum post was her only lifeline, the only proof that she wasn't descending into madness. Finding this person was paramount. The forum had no direct messaging system for private profiles, a frustrating dead end. So Amelia began to think like the marketing graduate she was. She started a digital breadcrumb trail. She created a new, anonymous email address and a new, anonymous profile on the same tattoo forum. She crafted a post, carefully worded to be both vague and specific, a coded message for anyone else who might be in her position. Subject: question about unique artist, signatures, post. Hi everyone. I recently got a very detailed floral piece and had an incredibly intense, almost hypnotic experience with the artist. The work is technically perfect, but I've been feeling a strange sense of disconnect from it, accompanied by very vivid nightmares. I also recently discovered what looks like a tiny, hidden signature from the artist worked into the design. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this? The feeling is hard to describe, almost like the tattoo isn't mine anymore. Any advice would be appreciated. She didn't mention Julian's name or the studio. She couldn't risk him seeing it and knowing she was on to him. She just had to hope the specific details, the intense experience, the nightmares, the hidden signature would act as a shibboleth, a secret password for others in his silent congregation. Then, she waited. The first 24 hours were agonizing. The only replies were from well-meaning but unhelpful forum members, suggesting it was buyer's remorse or praising the idea of an artist's signature as a mark of authenticity. Each reply felt like a dismissal, pushing her further into isolation. She was on the verge of giving up, of surrendering to the idea that she truly was alone, when an email notification popped up. It wasn't a reply to the forum thread. It was a direct email. From subject, your forum post message? Is it JT? Amelia's heart stopped. 2 simple letters. 2 initials that confirmed her entire reality. Her hands trembled as she typed her reply. Yes, on my forearm. A spray of wildflowers. The response came back almost instantly. A hummingbird on my bicep. I'm Lily. Or at least, I'm Lilipad_7. My real name is Maya. I think we need to talk. They arranged to meet the next day at a quiet, neutral coffee shop on the other side of town, far from both their homes and workplaces, and especially far from ink and dreams. Amelia arrived first, her nerves shot. She wore a thick, long-sleeved sweater despite the mild autumn weather, a physical barrier between her and the world. Every time the door opened, her stomach lurched. When Maya walked in, Amelia knew it was her instantly. She was a small, bird-like woman with large, haunted eyes that scanned the room before settling on Amelia. There was a shared fragility in their posture, a guardedness that Amelia recognized in herself. Maya approached the table, and they sat in silence for a long moment, 2 strangers bound by the same invisible wound. Maya spoke first, her voice a near whisper. He calls it the collector's mark, she said, not as a greeting but as a confession. I overheard him talking on the phone once when I went back for my free touch-up. He said he only gives it to his special pieces, his masterpieces. The word masterpieces landed like a punch to the gut. They weren't clients, they were acquisitions. They were items in his collection. Over the next 2 hours, their stories tumbled out, a flood of shared trauma. The details were eerily, terrifyingly similar. The enchanting studio, the disarming charm and the intense, almost predatory focus. The way he made them feel uniquely understood. The spiritual experience that curdled into a lingering sense of violation. The nightmares, and finally the discovery of the hidden initials. Maya had found hers by accident, noticing it in the reflection of a shop window one sunny afternoon. I thought I was going crazy, Maya confessed, her teacup rattling in its saucer as her hands shook. My friends, my boyfriend, they all told me how lucky I was to have a Julian Thorne original. They said I was being ungrateful, overly sensitive. How do you explain to someone that a beautiful piece of art feels like a contamination? Amelia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. It's like he planted a piece of himself inside you, she whispered, and you can't get it out. They found strength in their shared experience. The isolation that had been a core part of their torment began to dissolve. They weren't crazy. They weren't alone. As they talked, a new feeling began to take root alongside the fear. Anger. A cold, hard anger that demanded action. How many more of us are there? Amelia asked, her voice gaining a strength it hadn't had before. He's been in business for years. Chloe, a woman I work with, she has one. She still thinks he's a genius. We have to do something, Maya said, her eyes hardening. People see a beautiful tattoo. They don't see the psychological manipulation. They don't see the brand he's putting on us. What if it's more than that? What if the bomb? She trailed off, looking down at her hands. The bomb, Amelia prompted. I don't know, Maya admitted. It's probably nothing, but sometimes I get this weird, tingling sensation from the tattoo, even now, months later. And the smell of that bomb, chamomile and whatever. It was in his tea. It was in the incense in his studio. It was everywhere. It made me feel so relaxed, so compliant. The idea was chilling. Had they been drugged? Seemed fantastical, something out of a movie. But then, so did everything else about their experience. They decided their next step had to be the police. It was a daunting prospect. How could they walk into a police station and articulate a crime that was so insidious, so hard to define? An artist I willingly paid tattooed me, but he was too charming and it made me feel bad? Sounded flimsy, pathetic. But the hidden signature was proof. It was tangible evidence of a deception. Their visit to the local precinct was as difficult as they had imagined. They were directed to a weary-looking detective in a rumpled suit named Harding. He listened with a professional patience that bordered on skepticism as they recounted their stories. He examined their arms, squinting at the tiny initials. "A JT?" he said, leaning back in his chair, the springs groaning in protest. "Look, ladies, I understand you're upset. Feels like a breach of trust. But is it a crime? You hired him to put a permanent mark on you." He added a tiny signature. "Unusual, vain maybe, but I'm not sure it's assault." Amelia's anger flared. "It's not about the signature, detective," she said, her voice sharp. "It's about the deception. It's about the premeditated act of marking us without our consent. It's a pattern. He's doing this to women. He's branding them like cattle. What about the nightmares? The psychological distress? And what about the bomb?" Maya added, her voice trembling slightly. "What if he's using it to drug his clients?" Harding sighed, rubbing his temples. Psychological distress is hard to prosecute. And a claim about a drugged bomb, without a blood test from the time of the incident, that's just speculation. We'd need a sample of this bomb and a warrant to get it tested, and a judge isn't going to grant a warrant based on a bad feeling and a tiny signature. They left the station feeling defeated, unheard. The system that was supposed to protect them was just another wall of disbelief. Harding had taken their names and numbers, promising to look into it, but his tone suggested their file was already at the bottom of a very tall pile. But Julian must have heard something. Perhaps Harding made a preliminary, low-key call to the studio, asking about his signature policy. Whatever it was, the shift was immediate. A few days after their visit to the police, Amelia received an email. The sender was the official Ink and Dreams studio account. Subject: "Your healing and follow-up, dear Amelia. I hope this message finds you well and that your beautiful wildflower piece is healing perfectly. I was just reviewing my calendar and realized you never came in for your complimentary touch-up session. It's a crucial part of the process to ensure the longevity and vibrancy of the art we created together. I have an opening this Friday evening. I insist you come in. It's important to me that my work remains flawless." Warmly, Julian. The email was superficially polite, but the undertone was chillingly possessive. "My work. I insist." It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. He was testing her. He was pulling her back into his orbit. She showed the email to Maya, who had received a nearly identical one. "He knows?" Maya breathed, her face pale. "Someone tipped him off. He's trying to get us back into his studio, back under his control." The fear was back, sharp and suffocating. He was no longer a passive, haunting memory. He was an active threat. Amelia started looking over her shoulder again, jumping at every unexpected phone call. One evening, as she was leaving work, she saw him. He was standing across the street, partially obscured by a bus stop shelter, just watching her building. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't waiting for a bus. His pale blue eyes were fixed on the entrance. As soon as their eyes met, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and then turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd. The message was clear. "I can see you. I can get to you." The incident galvanized them. They couldn't wait for the police. They had to find more victims. They had to build a case so overwhelming that Detective Harding couldn't ignore it. They escalated their online search, moving beyond forums to social media. They spent hours scouring Instagram, looking for public photos tagged with Julian Thorne or Ink and Dreams. They would zoom in on every high-resolution photo of his work, searching for the telltale initials. It was painstaking, eye-straining work, but then they found one, a phoenix on a woman's back. And there, hidden in a swirl of flame near the wingtip, was the JT. They contacted the woman, a former client named Clara. Her reaction was explosive. She hadn't been haunted and subdued like Amelia and Maya. She was furious. She had long felt that Julian's charm was a manipulative facade and had been vaguely uncomfortable with her tattoo for years without knowing why. The discovery of the signature was the final piece of the puzzle. With Clara on board, they had a trio. They found a fourth, a young student named Ben, who had a complex geometric sleeve. Julian's collector's mark was on him, too, hidden in a nexus of intersecting lines. His story added a new dimension. Julian had preyed on his insecurities about his masculinity, praising his tolerance for pain, calling him a true warrior, all while leaving his possessive mark. The manipulation wasn't limited by gender. It was about power. They created a private, encrypted group chat, a safe space to share their stories and coordinate their efforts. They compiled a dossier, a timeline of Julian's actions, noting the consistencies in his methods. The initial flattery, the isolation in the studio, the intimate and hypnotic tattooing process, the gift of the bomb, the complimentary touch-up, and the hidden signature. They decided to give Detective Harding one more chance. Armed with 4 signed, detailed statements and clear photographic evidence of the signatures on 4 different people, they walked back into the precinct. This time, Harding listened differently. The singular, strange complaint had become a documented pattern of deceptive and manipulative behavior. 4 of you, he said, reading through the statements, his expression grim, all with the same story. He paused, tapping Clara's statement. And this one claims he saw him outside her apartment. He's stalking us, Amelia said, her voice steady. He's trying to intimidate us into silence. The touch-up emails, him watching my office. This is escalating. Harding finally looked convinced. The skepticism was gone, replaced by a cold, professional focus. Okay, he said, his voice firm. This is no longer about a tattoo. This is about harassment, intimidation, and a pattern of predatory behavior. And we're going to get a sample of that bomb. He explained his plan. They couldn't just raid the studio. Julian was too smart for that. He would have everything cleaned and hidden. They needed him to give them the evidence willingly. He wanted one of them to agree to the touch-up session. The idea was terrifying. To voluntarily walk back into that room, to put themselves back into his hands. The silence in the room was heavy. Then, Amelia heard herself speak. I'll do it, she said, surprising herself as much as anyone else. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but the anger was stronger. The need for justice was stronger. I'll go, but you're going to wire me, and you're going to be outside that door, ready to come in. Harding nodded slowly. We will be, he promised. The trap was set. Amelia replied to Julian's email, her fingers feeling strangely disconnected from her body. Hi Julian, you're right. I'm sorry for the delay. This Friday evening would be perfect. See you then. Amelia, the reply came back in minutes. Wonderful. I look forward to perfecting our masterpiece. Amelia stared at the screen, the hum of her computer sounding just like the buzz of a tattoo gun. She was walking back into the gilded cage. But this time she wouldn't be alone. And this time, she knew it wasn't a dream. The 5 days leading up to the touch-up session were the longest of Amelia's life. Sleep offered no escape, her nightmares returning with a vengeance, now filled with the added terror of her impending return to the studio. During the day, she moved through a fog of hypervigilance, every shadow seeming to hold a threat, every stranger's glance feeling like Julian's pale, predatory gaze. The support of Maya, Clara, and Ben was her only anchor. Their group chat was a constant stream of encouragement, a digital fortress against the fear. They were in this together, and that knowledge was the only thing that kept her from canceling the appointment and fleeing the city. The afternoon of the appointment, she met Detective Harding and a female undercover officer, Detective Chun, in a nondescript van parked a block away from Ink and Dreams. The van was filled with the low hum of surveillance equipment. Chan, a woman with a calm, reassuring demeanor, expertly fitted Amelia with a wire, taping the tiny microphone to her chest and running the nearly invisible wire to a small transmitter hidden in the small of her back. The recorder is live, Chen explained, her voice professional and steady. "We'll hear everything. The primary goal is to get him talking. We want him to admit to marking you without consent. Try to bring up the signature. Ask him what it is. The second goal is to get a sample of that bomb. If he offers it, take it. That will be our physical evidence." Harding leaned in, his expression serious. "Amelia, your safety is the priority. He gets aggressive, you feel threatened in any way, you use the safe word. The word is masterpiece. You say, 'This truly is a masterpiece.' And we are through that door in 10 seconds. Understood." Amelia nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. Masterpiece. The word he had used to describe her, to describe his work on her. Using it against him felt like a small, sharp piece of poetic justice. Walking that final block to the studio was surreal. The world seemed to be moving in slow motion. The sounds of the city muffled as if she were underwater. The familiar sigh of the bell above the door sounded like a death knell. The studio was exactly as she remembered. The scent of sandalwood, the soft ambient music, the emerald velvet couch. It was a perfectly constructed illusion of peace. And now that she could see the rot beneath it, it was nauseating. Julian emerged from the back, and his slow, deliberate smile made her skin crawl. He looked the same, ethereally handsome, but his pale eyes held a new glint she hadn't seen before, a cold, possessive triumph. He thought he had won. He thought he had successfully intimidated her back into his world. "Amelia," he purred, his voice a silken trap. "I'm so glad you came. I was worried I might have scared you away." The admission was subtle, a test. Amelia's heart hammered against the tiny microphone taped to her chest. She forced a nervous smile. "Of course not. I've just been busy with work. I'm excited to perfect it." He led her to the tattooing chair. The familiar ritual began, the clean, antiseptic smell, the crinkle of the plastic wrap on the armrest. Every step sent a jolt of traumatic memory through her. She sat down, her body rigid. "Relax," he murmured, placing a hand on her shoulder. His touch felt like a brand of ice. "There's no need to be tense with me. We're old friends." He didn't immediately pick up the tattoo gun. Instead, he pulled up a stool and sat opposite her, his knees almost touching hers, creating a suffocating bubble of intimacy. "You know," he began, his voice low and conspiratorial, "I've worked on hundreds of people, but some are special. You're special, Amelia. You have the perfect canvas, the perfect spirit. You take the art in a way others can't." This was it, the script he used to lull his victims. This time, she knew her lines. "What makes me so special?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, which she hoped sounded like awe rather than terror. "You appreciate the bond between the artist and his creation," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "Most people think they are buying a product. They don't understand the exchange. A piece of me goes into them. I leave a mark that is more than just ink. It's a part of my soul." "A mark?" she prompted, her heart pounding. "You mean, like a signature?" Julian's smile widened. He was proud. He was arrogant. He wanted to confess. "Exactly," he breathed. "A signature. A collector's mark for my private collection. Hidden away from the world. A secret just between us. A reminder that you'll always carry a piece of me with you." The casual, possessive cruelty of his words, spoken so softly, was staggering. In the surveillance van, Harding nodded grimly to Chun. They had it. Clear admission. Did you put one on me?" Amelia asked, feigning innocence. He chuckled, a low, unpleasant sound. "Of course. My finest pieces always get my mark." He leaned in closer, tracing the wildflowers on her arm with his finger, his touch making her want to tear her skin off. "See? Right there. Hidden in the shade. Our little secret." He stood up then, his mood shifting back to business. "Now, let's just do a tiny touch-up on this petal here. A little more depth." He turned to his station to prepare the ink. Amelia watched, her body screaming at her to run. The buzz of the tattoo gun started, the sound drilling into her skull. This was the moment she dreaded most. She couldn't let that needle touch her skin again. As he turned back towards her, tattoo gun in hand, she took a deep breath. "You know, Julian," she said, her voice louder, clearer than before. "Now that I'm looking at it again, I don't think it needs any touching up at all. This truly is a masterpiece." The safe word hung in the air. For a split second, Julian's charming facade shattered. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of confusion and then rage crossing his features. He knew he'd been tricked. The door to the studio crashed open. Harding and Chun, followed by 2 uniformed officers, stormed in. "Police! Drop it, Thorne!" Harding yelled. Julian froze, the tattoo gun still humming in his hand. He looked from the police to Amelia, his expression a mask of pure, reptilian fury. The illusion of the artist was gone, replaced by the cornered predator. He lunged, not for the door, but towards Amelia, grabbing her arm. "You worthless little canvas," he snarled, his voice a venomous hiss. Chun was on him in an instant, her movements swift and practiced. She used a precise takedown maneuver, forcing him to release Amelia and slamming him face first onto the polished concrete floor. The tattoo gun clattered away. Harding was there a second later, planting a knee in Julian's back and cuffing his hands behind him. It was over in seconds. The sudden, violent burst of action was followed by an echoing silence, broken only by Julian's ragged, furious breathing and the crackle of the police radio. Amelia scrambled back from the chair, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. Chun immediately went to her side, a firm, comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," she said. "You were incredibly brave." As the uniformed officers hauled a silent, seething Julian to his feet and led him out, Harding began directing the search of the studio. "Bag everything," he commanded, "especially that tin of bomb on the counter." The aftermath was a whirlwind. The raid on Ink and Dreams made the local news. The story of the twisted tattooist and his hidden collector's mark was sensational, a dark fairy tale come to life. As Julian sat in jail, denied bail, more victims began to surface. Women and men who had carried their discomfort and confusion in silence for years suddenly had a name for what had been done to them. The final count of known victims with the hidden signature reached 17. The lab results for the healing bomb came back a week later, and they were more sinister than anyone had imagined. It contained not only calendula and chamomile, but also a low dose of a benzodiazepine derivative. It wasn't enough to render a person unconscious, but it was enough to lower inhibitions, increase suggestibility, and create a state of dreamy, relaxed compliance. Combined with his hypnotic voice and the intimate setting, he had been systematically drugging his clients to make them more susceptible to his psychological manipulation. The crime was no longer just about harassment or a hidden signature. It was assault. The trial was a grueling ordeal. Julian's defense team tried to paint him as an eccentric artist and the victims as hysterical, attention-seeking women who were simply experiencing tattoo regret. But the evidence was insurmountable. The audio from Amelia's wire, the lab results from the bomb, and the powerful, consistent testimony of 17 different people all telling the same story, created a portrait of a meticulous, narcissistic predator. Amelia, Maya, Clara, and Ben sat in the front row of the courtroom every single day. They were a silent, united front, watching Julian, stripped of his enchanting studio and his artist's tools, sitting in a cheap suit under the harsh courtroom lights. They saw him for what he truly was. A small, pathetic man whose only power came from deception and control. The guilty verdict was a moment of profound, earth-shattering relief. The sentence was long. He would not be in a position to harm anyone else for a very, very long time. But justice from the legal system was only part of the healing. The true recovery happened in the community they built. The 17 victims formed a support group, a place where they could speak their truths without fear of judgment. They talked about the nightmares, the lingering feelings of violation, the complex relationship they now had with a part of their own bodies. Some chose to have the tattoos removed, enduring the painful, lengthy process of laser treatments to erase his mark completely. Others chose to reclaim the art. They found other artists, compassionate women and men who listened to their stories with empathy and helped them transform Julian's work. A phoenix had new, brighter flames added that completely obscured the signature. A geometric sleeve had new patterns woven in, changing its meaning. Amelia chose to keep hers, but she had it altered. She found a talented female artist who added a small, beautifully rendered songbird, perched on one of the lavender stems, singing its heart out. For her, it was a symbol of finding her voice. The tattoo was no longer a story of her violation. It was a story of her survival. It was a reminder that even when someone tries to write their own twisted narrative on you, you always have the power to write the final chapter yourself. The gilded cage was gone, and in its place was an open sky.